this meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order at 1:01 p.m. on September 6, 2018. Can I ask everybody back, can they hear me? Thank you. Can I ask, is this meeting being recorded? As the meeting is being recorded, let me put public on notice that the meeting is indeed being recorded. Can I ask, please, everybody to shut up their cell phones or put them on mute? Thank you. I have no opening comments. I'll just go into the agenda. We have a pretty full agenda, as I think you're all aware today, so we're going to try to be as efficient as possible. We have one set of minutes to approve. These were minutes that we deferred from last meeting, so these are from August 9th, 2018. The executive director's report will include the normal dimensions of staffing. We have four, is that correct? Four new staff members to introduce. We will give you the update on where we stand with respect to license applications and where they are in the process. You will recall that several meetings ago, we authorized the executive director to send out an RFR for open data technology support. We are going to hear from the executive director with respect to a recommendation on that today. We have two sets of issues by the commission. One is a recommendation on staff delegation, and Commissioner McBride will lead us through that conversation. Second, as we discussed in our last meeting, we are beginning the timeline of trying to execute in a timely and effective manner the transition of medical marijuana supervision from DPH to our commission. Our staff, and we'll acknowledge some very specific contributions here, but our staff has developed a set of draft regulations that we will discuss, review, and vote on. That obviously could take a fair amount of time since it's pretty lengthy. There's two sets. One is modification to the medical marijuana regulations required by changing regulatory authority from DPH to the Cannabis Control Commission. So there are a lot of just changing the name DPH to CCC, but there are other changes as well that we'll go through. And then there are regulations that are new with respect to co-location of an adult use in a medical marijuana facility at the same location. So we'll go through those. We have 6 applications for licenses that the staff will make a recommendation on with respect to provisional licensing, and I think that'll be it. But it'll be a relatively full day. We will take a break at some point, probably after we get through the regulations before we get into the license recommendations. Okay. Any questions from the commission? And the first order of business is to discuss and vote on approving the minutes from August 9th, 2018. Can I ask, has the Commission had a chance to review these minutes? These are the minutes that we briefly talked about. There were significant suggested changes, I think primarily from Commissioner Title. We agreed to defer so that everybody would have a chance to look through and consider those suggested edits. Has everybody had a chance to do so? Are there any questions or comments on the minutes as proposed, edited by Commissioner Tuttle? Can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the meeting minutes from August 9th, 2018. Thank you. Let's move into the Executive Director's report, but before we do so, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that I believe the Executive Director's beard is growing in very nicely. We are going to have, actually, I misled you when I talked about the agenda. We are going to have a formal vote on the Commission about what we think about this beard, but we'll wait a little bit for that. And I also noticed that you're also red.
Match my tie.
Okay, Mr. Executive Director, could we have your, starting with the introduction of new staff, please?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to introduce, at this point, we have 4 new folks that joined us as of this week, as of Tuesday, given the Monday holiday. They are our newest investigators, joining the team of Yao Gibi as the Chief of Investigations and Enforcement, and Patrick B.A. as our Director of Investigations. Those folks are Rosa Pena, Chantel Porter, Colin Soper, and Michael E.
Can you all stand up, please?
So I'll go through them individually. As you know, that we're beginning to fill out our investigative team, and these are the first 4 that are joining us in that capacity. Rosa most recently worked for the City of Lawrence as a health code inspector, where she conducted inspections, ensuring compliance with state sanitary codes, mass building codes, and city regulations, along with inspecting food establishments. Chantel joins us from the Gaming Commission, where she was a gaming agent. There, she was responsible for maintaining close, continuous surveillance of all gaming areas and the entire property to protect aspects of the casino's operations. Colin joins us, having most recently worked at the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation, where he collaborated with the USDA to implement emergency protocols regarding the eradication of the Asian longhorned beetle from Massachusetts. He has extensive knowledge in life cycles and control methodologies for exotic insects, tree diseases, and invasive plants affecting Massachusetts forests. And lastly, but certainly not least, Michael Yee joins us from the Mass Division of Insurance, where he was an examiner, closely monitoring the financial solvency of Mass domiciled insurance companies, ensuring that their transactions met the division's goals of fostering a stable financial health insurance market. So those are the four folks that have joined us this week, and I think what you'll hopefully seen during each of their backgrounds, they bring a real diverse skill set to the commission that we are, of course, hoping to leverage as we begin to build our investigative team and start to really hone our operating procedures for the inspectional process. So really excited to have them join us, really excited for their early contributions, and obviously excited to get them underway.
Great. Thank you. It's great to have you guys on board, so welcome. You can sit down now. Any other staffing issues, Mr. Executive Director?
Not at this time.
So then next item would be an update on the status of license applications.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you see the usual slides here. First is the kind of broader overall picture, which is there are 2,548 total applications that are somewhere in progress or in process in our portal. 309 are pending with at least one part of the application or one packet having been submitted to the commission. 140 have been withdrawn, 2,075 are incomplete, and of course the commission has issued to date 24 provisional licenses. They break down to the following column that you see on the right-hand side, which is 2 craft marijuana cooperatives, 4 independent testing lab, 2 laboratory agents, 60 cultivation, 110 establishment agents, 8 micro business, 38 product manufacturer, 3 research facilities, 71 retail, 4 transportation with an existing establishment license, and lastly 7 third-party transportation. That's how you get to the 309. The next slide is a bit more of a look at what the workload for the commission staff at this point is, which is 125 applications have been submitted, with all 4 packets having been submitted. They break down to the following: 3 independent testing lab, 43 cultivation, which is an increase of 4 from the last meeting, 3 micro business, 33 product manufacturer, an increase of 4 from the last meeting, 3 research facility, 38 retail, an increase of 5 from the last meeting, and lastly 2 transportation with an existing establishment license. That's the 125. That represents an increase of 13 applications from the last meeting. Those 125 break down into 75 with R&D priority, 3 with economic empowerment priority, and 47 with a general applicant not having secured priority status. And again, those 125 applications represent 67 different entities.
Any questions before we go?
So next slide kind of represents where those 125 applications stand from a process standpoint, which is that there are 21 that are awaiting review that staff has not dug into as of today. Of course, included within that is the 13 that have been submitted in the past 2 weeks. 48 that have been sent out or returned, requiring additional information, or therefore been deemed to be incomplete. 26 are out for third-party response, which could either be the background check, third party, or of course the municipal notice that is required for compliance with local ordinances and bylaws. And there are 6 before the commission today for consideration, and 24 that have been considered and been issued a provisional license. Again, that's the 125.
And the map.
So the map, as per usual, lays out where the applications are coming from based on county. As I have in the past, I'll kind of give you a sense of where we've seen the increase from. That is additional application from Berkshire County, 1 additional application from Hampshire County, 4 from Worcester County, 1 from Middlesex, 1 from Essex, 2 from Barnstable, and lastly 3 from Nantucket.
Great. Other questions? Thank you. Next topic is the open data RFR. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you have before you as for a slide is a bit of the process that we've taken or used to get to today's recommendation for entering contract negotiations. As you will recall, July 18th is when we published the RFP or RFR to Combis, the state's procurement website, as well as to our website. There were a number of other milestones that we've hit. Responses, of course, were due by August 6th. In between there, of course, we had the opportunity for vendors to submit questions for us. We responded to those questions and posted those materials to our website as well. There was in total, on August 5th, or 6th, excuse me, we received a total of 5 responses from vendors, from proposed vendors. Those 5 vendors, it was a variety of responses. Some were just consultative efforts. Others proposed solutions for both open data and business intelligence combined into one. Once compiled, the PMT, which consisted of 7 members of the commission staff, convened and evaluated each one of those responses, as we have in previous procurements. Of course, we reviewed for the completeness and robustness of the submission, their strategy and ability to meet our timelines and our needs and prior experience of the jurisdictions. Of course, supplier diversity, and lastly, very important, was their cost. Those 5 were reduced to a single vendor that was invited in for a demonstration. That demonstration was held on August 20th, and after that, the PMT again conferred and decided to recommend for the Commission's consideration and recommend entering into contract negotiations with the vendor Socrata Incorporated, which is based in Seattle, Washington. Again, the PMT evaluated each of the responses and was confident that anyone that did apply certainly could have done this work. What really differentiated Socrata from the others is its functionality of their reporting and their exporting of relevant data, their ability to meet our complex and moving timelines, their security model, which is indicated as FedRAMP moderate, and their controls and compliance with NIST, their proposed engagement model, which is of course interactive with our team and the Commission. Of course, their references as well. It's important to note that they are the vendor that the Comptroller has worked with on the See-Through website, which is an open data portal as well. And lastly, they've worked with the state of Washington, the Liquor and Cannabis Board there, to maintain their open data platform and that dashboard. So therefore, the recommendation of the PMT, based on all those factors, is that the Commission, we would recommend to the Commission that we begin contract negotiations with Socrata for a business intelligence and open data solution. I'd like to remind folks, especially the public, that this is not complete the procurement process. We still do need to enter into negotiations, and this would be entering that final stage. Any final award and any final contract negotiations would again come back to the Commission for your approval. So I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Appreciate that, Mr. Executive Director. Are there any questions? Then can I ask for a motion to approve the Executive Director's recommendation to authorize the Executive Director and staff to negotiate a contract subject to Commission approval for RFR?
So moved.
Excuse me, for open data. So thank you. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approve that. Mr. Executive Director, when would you expect to be in a position to come back to the Commission with a recommendation on a finalized contract?
Hard to predict. We would begin in earnest with Socrata now that the recommendation's been approved. My hope is that we've got our feet under us from a negotiating standpoint with other procurements, so I think we're pretty comfortable. This is a technology contract, which of course may add different layers of complexity that we want to be able to manage, but I would say hopefully within a month's time.
And my favorite question on procurement, this is in budget?
This is within budget, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Executive Director. Anything else in your report before we move on?
If I may, just a few other, given that this is a procurement as well, the RFQ for social equity, that program, the window for submissions closes tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Also related to that, or related to item closing, which is the Environmental Working Group has an open public comment period, which closes on the 14th of September at 5 p.m. So just want to make sure that we're able to get that so folks can be aware that those deadlines are coming up quickly.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Appreciate it. I'd like to suggest that the next agenda item will be Commissioner McBride leading us through a discussion and a vote on her recommendation with respect to delegation of authority to the staff on certain decisions. So, Commissioner McBride.
So this is to follow up on some conversations that we've had over the past many months. Here is a motion that I'm going to distribute. Relevant to Christine.
Yep.
So the purpose of this motion is consistent with our building this regulatory agency, which we obviously and perhaps most importantly have the task of licensing. This is intended to enable our staff to be responsive to applicants and to licensees in as much of a real-time way as possible. And I know this is already happening as a result of the really hard work of folks like Kyle and Yao and Patrick, and certainly Matt Giancola, who's kind of on the front line of constituent questions and receiving questions from applicants and potential applicants, and as well as others in the commission at the staff level. And so in an effort to make sure that we're continuing to move forward with license processing, registration processing, and certainly moving to the ultimate goal of final licensure, I'm putting forward this motion. Actually, it's two motions. One is the delegation of authority to licensing and inspectional staff to interpret and apply our regulations at 935 CMR 500. And the second motion is a delegation of authority to licensing staff to act on marijuana establishment agent registration applications, including but not limited to the authority to grant waivers where it is deemed to be appropriate. So I'll read the motions into the record.
One at a time?
Yeah. So the first motion is a motion to delegate the authority to interpret and apply the regulations as they appear in 935 CMR 500 to the appropriate commission staff through the executive director and consistent with the appropriate supervisor's oversight as reflected on the commission's organizational chart for purposes of programming, licensing, and enforcement. The origin of this is largely because I know I have received questions, and I imagine that other commissioners have received questions from individuals about nuances within the regulations. How are we interpreting this, and how are we applying this? And I think that there are discussions that rise to the level of policy decisions, and certainly this is not intended to short circuit that discussion and to delegate that authority, but this really is intended to allow our licensing staff to move forward with answering those questions and providing guidance in a way that allows for the efficiency of informing applicants and licensees. So I'd like to, open up a discussion among the commission on doing this.
Before you make a motion, are there questions or discussion topics with respect to the first motion? Let's leave the second one aside for the time being. Commissioner Doyle? Got a hold of it.
There.
You can keep getting in the hold.
I would request, and we can do it through motion or however everyone thinks is appropriate, but I think we do need to add to the motion and express, hate to use the word disclaimer where, in this context, but on that, this does not make them policy makers, because I think we want to be clear on that.
Do you have a
and
specific language
I
that
can
you could suggest?
noodle for a second while
I'll do that. Are
people
there
are
other
working on that.
while she's doing that, are there other comments or questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Connell?
Just that I know there have been some commission votes since the regulations were final, so I don't know if we want to apply the regulations and commission policy decisions.
And policy decisions.
You're gonna
I'll write it up.
Put
Yep.
your amendment, your just change in Commissioner Thomas. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Why don't we just hold off then until you're ready, Commissioner Doyle? No, now make a formal motion, could you just,
Well, yeah, can we just
actually,
give her a look before? Thank you.
yeah, so you want to make a formal motion?
Sure. So including Commissioner Doyle's amendment, the motion reads, so I move to delegate the authority to interpret and apply the regulations as they appear in 935 CMR 500 and policy decisions as voted by the Commission to the appropriate Commission staff through the Executive Director and consistent with the appropriate supervisor's oversight as reflected on the Commission's organizational chart for purposes of programming, licensing, and enforcement, except that such interpretations shall not be deemed to be policy-making decisions on behalf of the Commission.
You're comfortable with that? So you're making a motion for that language, can I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let the record show that as amended, the motion was carried by unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Should we go to the second motion, please?
Sure. So the second motion is relative to the delegation of authority to licensing staff to act on marijuana establishment agent registration applications, including but not limited to authority to grant waivers. This is intended to do exactly what it said, which is allow for our staff to be processing registrations and applications for registrations, and where appropriate to be considering waivers and acting on those applications for waivers. So the motion is to delegate the authority to act on applications for registration as a marijuana establishment agent pursuant to 935 CMR 500.030, registration of marijuana establishment agents, and 500.031, denial of a registration card, or to take action against a registration pursuant to 935 CMR 500.032, revocation of a marijuana establishment agent registration card, to the appropriate Commission licensing staff through the Executive Director and consistent with the Director of Licensing's oversight for purposes of granting, denying, or revoking a registration or allowing a waiver from the registration requirements consistent with 935 CMR 500.700. So that's obviously very wordy, but the intent of it is to allow for registrations to move forward, being processed. Also, in the future, where there may be an issue that arises that the licensing staff needs to act on, to enable them to take that action. This clearly does not preclude any process rights, any due process rights of anyone that has a registration. Those remain intact. It is purely to allow for the staff to be acting efficiently and moving forward with evaluating and making decisions on registrations.
Thank you. Before we form motion, are there questions or comments? Commissioner Tom?
I support this. I do want to bring up the previous internal policy statement that the Executive Director had brought us regarding documentation, with the point being from a practical standpoint that as these decisions are made, they should be documented in such a way that when similar situations come up, the same decisions will be made. And so in that light, I would like to add to the end, consistent with the Commission's internal documentation policies.
You okay with that, Commissioner?
I appreciate that amendment. I think it's really important, and I completely agree with that, so I appreciate that. Thanks.
I have one question actually for the Executive Director. So I support this as well. I am wondering what visibility the Commission will have into the staff decisions if we enact this policy.
I would foresee whether it be periodic or frequent report back to the Commission on any activity, actually frankly with both, which is if there's anything that, to Commissioner Doyle's point, if there's anything that would rise to the level of even teasing a potential policy, it would obviously be brought back to the Commission.
Okay. But I'm interested, in the second motion that we're discussing right now about just what the overall demographics look like, and so I would request a periodic report. We can discuss the specifics, but a periodic report to the Commission of where we are in this process, perhaps not too dissimilar from what you prepare now for license applications.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with that, and I think it's really important. As with any of our regulations, we need to be keeping tabs on what the effect of them, what the effect of the regulation is. And so I do think that it's really important for us to know and to have some real numbers associated with how this is functioning and how we are doing in terms of processing, licensing, registrations, and decisions that we're making.
Great.
So.
Okay. Any other comments before we ask for a formal motion? Commissioner, could you make a formal motion, please?
Move to delegate the authority to act on applications for registration as a marijuana establishment agent pursuant to 935 CMR 500.030, registration of marijuana establishment agents, and 500.031, denial of a registration card, or to take action against a registration pursuant to 935 CMR 500.032, revocation of a marijuana establishment agent registration card, to the appropriate commission licensing staff through the executive director and consistent with the director of licensing's oversight for purposes of granting, denying, or revoking a registration or allowing a waiver from the registration requirements consistent with 935 CMR 500.700 and consistent with the commission's internal documented policies?
Documentation.
Documentation policies.
So moved. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner McBride made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Title. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved this, and Commissioner McBride, thank you very much for your leadership on this. The next topic is draft regulations, and I'm going to suggest that we start with the overall medical regulations and then move into the co-location regulations. I want to make just a couple of comments before we get started. First, I wanted to acknowledge the leadership and great work on the part of our legal staff, Christine and Pauline and Andrew. I just wanted to kind of remind all of us, because I've certainly been thinking about it myself, about the last time we went through this process when we didn't have staff, didn't have a general counsel or legal staff. The commission, and particularly, unfortunately, the 3 lawyers on the commission, ended up being our staff attorneys as well, and this process has been both more pleasant, I'm sure, for the commission, but I think actually quite a bit more efficient. And so I want to just recognize the leadership that our legal team showed in developing these regulations. I'm going to ask the executive director to lead us through this and start with just a reminder of where we are in terms of the process for transition, the timeline for transition. The process by which we arrived at these draft regulations. I'm sure there are other people to thank besides the 3 that I just did, so I'd appreciate it if you could acknowledge other contributions. I'd appreciate it if you talk about kind of the philosophy that we use to develop these regulations, and also kind of with whom we collaborated, both at DPH and I'm sure other agencies or other third parties as well. And then my suggestion, and I'd welcome feedback from the other commissioners, my suggestion is that we do what we did when we went through our draft regulations back in, I guess it was December, which is just go through section by section, and if there's nothing, if nobody has an issue, we'll just go to the next section. But I'd like to make sure that we're being thorough and complete by going through it section by section. Is it okay with everybody? Commissioner McBride?
Just in order to expedite the discussion, is it possible to kind of forego sort of like typo things and
great
sort of
suggestion.
like
Yeah.
We can move those over
Yeah,
to
no.
the general counsel's office.
I think that's a great suggestion. So only substantive comments. I appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Executive Director, would you take over, please?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you indicated, this is part of a broader, bigger process of transferring the entire medical use of marijuana program from the Department of Public Health to the Cannabis Control Commission. Inherent within that is a requirement that that the Commission adopt regulations pursuant to that program to transfer the authority over the existing R&Ds and of course any future medical use of marijuana participants, be they establishments, patients, or providers. So this is a critical step in that process, which of course begins the regulatory development process, which in order for us to facilitate that transfer by the end of the calendar year needs to begin in earnest today. Also pursuant to today, if the Commission is amenable to these regulations, would begin the public comment period, thus allowing us to get feedback on not only these medical use of marijuana regulations, but as you indicated earlier, another draft of new regulations relative to co-location. So that process will hopefully, if the commission's amenable, begin today, cease or come to a culmination with a public hearing in late October, thus allowing us to develop any modified regulations based off this draft to then promulgate within the December timeframe. So, to your question as far as philosophy and how we've approached it, consistent with that lift and shift model of taking the program as it exists today and bringing it under the commission's purview, we've really tried to seize that and capture that opportunity in this draft regulations that are before you now. I'm happy to identify some of the changes, but you'll really see an attempt of taking the department and turning it into the Cannabis Control Commission and trying to capture both substance and spirit as it exists today. So these hopefully will look familiar to folks that are living within this regulatory scheme today. And of course, we'll welcome their feedback during the public comment period as well. Some of the changes that you'll see, there's an addition of a section of regulations relative to fees. That exists because the Department of Public Health as an administrative executive branch agency, their fees are codified through administration and finance process. With the commission being an independent agency, we are obligated to adopt our own fees, as we did on the adult use side. That said, the changes to fees, there are none. We did not make any changes proposed in this draft. Again, really trying to be consistent with that process of lifting and shifting, and also giving the commission a chance to opine on those fees and not take that liberty ourselves. So the version that you'll see can really be returned to a kind of a track change version, so to speak, of the medical regulations. There's an update to some of the definitions that are periodic throughout. The addition of a definition relative to program transfer, which is a specific reference to this process that we're in the middle of now. And then conceptually, a big item that is, I think, worth a note at this point for the commission, but of course the public as well, is, as you know, we are in the process of rolling out a metric inventory tracking system. We do ask and require that all RMDs participate in that seed to sale tracking system of record. We do give them a date of April 1st, 2019. We propose that date to the commission of April 1st, 2019, for them to put inventory into the metric system, thus allowing us as the Cannabis Control Commission to see 100% of inventory that is currently being cultivated, processed, or dispensed or sold in Massachusetts. That April 1st, 2019 date is both for us to properly put information or share information with the existing RFDs, but also for us to begin the process of getting them into the metric system and making sure that their agents are in the system and that it is functional from a capacity standpoint, which of course we have a great deal of confidence in our ability to do that as well. Beyond that, the changes are not intended to be substantive, and to your point, Mr. Chairman, intended to be consistent with the existing Department of Public Health's approach to medical use of marijuana. So also I do want to commend our team at the commission, led by Christine Bailey, Pauline and Andrew on her team, as well as Kyle Potman, our Director of Licensing, and Yao GB, our Chief of Investigations and Enforcement. This has been a real team effort on our end. Of course, I need to thank the Department of Public Health. They've been a real asset for us in first understanding their regulations, but also helping us kind of navigate that regulatory shift as well. Folks at the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, especially around the questions of fees and where that should be landing, of course, on an ongoing basis. The Department of Agricultural Resources has been a real asset for us as well from a pesticide standpoint and their jurisdictional oversight of that. So we've had a lot of valuable partners. And of course, the existing dispensaries, the patient community, we've been really the beneficiary of a lot of feedback, and I'm very confident that that's going to continue during the public comment period as well. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have on the regulations, and I'm sure Christine will do the same.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Executive Director. So unless there are general questions about this, I'd like to begin the process of going through section by section. But are there any general questions for the Executive Director or for our General Counsel? In the aforementioned desire for expediency, what I will do is I will skip saying 935 CMR 501 and just do the 3 to the right of the decimal place to get the section that I'd like to discuss. And again, if there's nothing on a section, we'll just go through it quickly and keep moving. So let's start with .001 purpose. Comments? Thank you. .002 scope. Comments? Okay, thank you. .003 definitions. Thank you. .004 fees. Aforementioned.
I just have a question.
Go ahead. No, please, Commissioner Doyle.
In the current draft, I think, and it could be because I'm looking at the track change copy, there is a new fee, construction, renovation, or modification.
Sorry, say that. I didn't hear that. Could you say that again, please?
Construction, renovation, or modification, there's a new fee proposed.
Yeah, that is right in our discussions, that came up as perhaps the need for a fee there.
Mhm.
I think more research has to be done as to whether, and what that fee would be. But we wanted to put that out there as a potential, basically issue for public comment.
So let's have to consider that before the final regulations.
Yep, good
Any,
idea.
any other? Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Title?
I'm not going to have any proposals today because I want to go through the public comment period
Sure.
first. But I do want to just bring up the suggestion of waiving the annual patient registration fee and seeing what the public thinks.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think we're going to take a look at all the fees, including that one, during this process. So thank you. Anything else on 004 fees? Okay, thanks. 005 registration of certifying physicians. Okay. 006 registration of certified nurse practitioners. I think we're all about that. Any questions on or comments on 006? Okay, thanks. 010 written certification of debilitating medical condition for a qualifying patient. Okay, thank you. 015 registration of qualifying patients. Okay. 020 registration of personal caregivers. Okay. 021 registration of caregiving institutions. Zero 22 registration of institutional caregivers.
Just
Yes,
something to
Commissioner
raise.
Title.
Somewhere in these last several sections, I think we need to add more on temporary certification, but I think we can come back to that after.
Okay.
public comment.
Okay, so noted. Nothing on 022 registration of institutional caregivers. Then let's move on to .025 registration or responsibilities of caregivers. Uh, 030 registration of RMD agents.
One more thing.
Yes,
sir.
go ahead, please.
That the automatic exclusion are different under the medical program and the adult use program, so I just want to take a look at that. It may not be something that we can change, but I'd like to at least look at it.
Okay, so noted, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may as well.
Yes, please, Mr. Executive Director.
You'll notice a theme as well, and I failed to mention this in my overview, but I think it's important to note from just so folks publicly know, but also to bring the Commission's attention to it. There's also desire, you'll see a lot of references to cards, or whether it be registration cards, agent registration cards, patient registrations. If they've been validly issued by the department, we will honor that. The intent here is to honor that so as to not be disruptive until the time of expiration or renewal. The intent there, of course, is that once the program shifts, there's going to be folks that are, they may have a renewal date that is a few months out. The intent here is to, again, strictly so as to not be disruptive. We honor those,
Yes.
but so there's a few references to things that were validly issued prior to the Commission's adoption of the program. So just want to bring attention to that.
I appreciate that. I think that's the right approach.
Could I ask a follow-up
Commissioner
question? could I just request from you, Mr. Executive Director, that perhaps we put out some sort of information on our website to reassure patients so they don't get concerned about
Absolutely.
such issues? Thanks.
That's a great suggestion.
Good
Thanks.
idea, thank you. Okay, anything else on 030, registration of R&D agents? 031, registration of independent testing laboratories? Same issue with certification.
That's great.
Any questions or comments on this? Okay, 032, registration of independent testing laboratory agents. Okay. 035, hardship cultivation registration. Dot 100, registration of registered marijuana dispensaries. Questions or comments? Dot 105, operational requirements for registered marijuana dispensaries. Okay. Dot 110, security requirements for registered marijuana dispensaries. Dot 200, confidentiality. Dot 300, inspection of registered marijuana dispensaries. Dot 305, deficiency statements. Dot 310, registered marijuana dispensary grounds for denial of initial application for registration. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Dot 310, plan of correction. I apologize. Okay. Dot 400, registered marijuana dispensary grounds for denial of initial application for registration. Dot 405, registered marijuana dispensary regulation grounds for denial of renewal applications and revocation. Okay. Dot 410, void registered marijuana dispensary registration. Dot 415, registered marijuana dispensary registration, limitation of sales by registered marijuana dispensaries. Dot 420, denial of registration card or hardship cultivation registration. Dot 425, revocation of registration of a registration card or hardship cultivation.
.430, revocation of a certifying healthcare provider registration. .435, void certified physician registration. I'm sorry, void certifying. I think that's correct. It's, in the regulations, actually, as opposed to the table of contents, it's void certifying physician registration. Okay. .440, void registration cards. .445, summary cease and desist order and quarantine order. .450, summary suspension order. .500, administrative review, non-selection of registered marijuana dispensaries application for initial registration. .505, hearings. .510, effective denial of renewal or revocation of registered marijuana dispensary registration, revocation of RMD agent registration, and surrender of a registration. .600, municipal requirements. .650, non-conflict with other law. .700, waivers. .800, severability. Yes, Mr. Dora?
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed something.
What section, please?
It's section 4, definitions, under the definition of healthcare provider.
In section 004, definition of healthcare provider?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just give me a second, please.
Sure.
There you go, they're more efficient. Yep.
Yep, top of that page. And I apologize, I didn't notice this earlier, but when you made the comment about certifying physician, it popped into my head. I think under 94I, when it goes into effect, in addition to certifying physicians and certified nurse practitioners, which is a mouthful, I agree with you.
Yes.
Physician's assistants may also be able to certify, so I just want to make sure that we include that in the definition. If someone could
Yeah.
double check that my memory is correct.
That's great, that's a great catch.
I try.
No, it's good to know. Any other comments before I ask for a motion to approve the draft regulations? Commissioner, General Counsel?
Mr. Chair, I would just say that if, to the extent that anyone has any ministerial changes, that they can provide those to me. We'll try to release a version of this that fixes typos and things
Yeah,
like that.
and just if I can ask the Commission to do that as quickly as possible, when we will be able to release the draft regulations? in your
Well,
opinion?
depending on when I get contributions, I would look to do it no later than tomorrow.
Is that okay with everybody? So I'd really appreciate if you do have typos or other edits, non-substantive edits, if you get them to our General Counsel as quick as possible.
With that said, can I have a motion, please, to approve the draft regulations, 935 CMR 501?
So moved. Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
The record show the Commission unanimously approves the draft regulations 935 CMR 501. And once again, my gratitude to Christine and the rest of the legal team, as well as our staff. So thank you very much. Would you care, Mr. Executive Director, just give us a brief overview of the co-location
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
draft regulations, then we'll go through the same process?
So in an attempt to organize the regulations in I guess a thoughtful way, that what we've seen, the Commission, and we're of course grateful for your approval of it, is the adult use regulation serving as 935 CMR 500, the medical regulation serving as 935 CMR 501, to now propose a draft of 935 CMR 502, which would identify those establishments, be they RMDs and marijuana establishments licensed through the Commission, that will be co-located together. This is really an attempt on our part to identify those issues that will be regulated under both environments, and to bring some harmony to those two regulations and breathe some, again, some of that harmony into their co-located operations. And what you'll see is some consistency in definitions, making sure that they apply to both. Obviously, identifying what is a co-located marijuana establishment or operation, which is now a CMO, and trying to identify which pieces of. So again, if you're purely a marijuana establishment of the adult use market, you would comply with 935 CMR 500. Purely RMD 935 CMR 501. But if you are both, how we would apply as a commission both requirements, and again, an attempt to bring some harmony. So the items that are included in that, and again, this is really based on feedback we've gotten, the questions that have come into the commission of how does the commission feel about, for instance, packaging and labeling, or advertising restrictions that may apply in the adult use market but not necessarily apply to the RMD operation. So I give a lot of credit to the folks on our team, of course, led by Christine and Pauline, Andrew, Kyle, Yao, for pulling together, really spending some time on evaluating the various questions we've gotten and how we may try to, again, really harmonize the two regs and actually make them a functional co-located facility, but also giving direction to us as staff of how we are to enforce against both sets of regulations, but also, again, answering questions from establishments that are asking those very same questions. So happy to go through them, of course, in any detail you may ask, but I guess I'm trying to breathe some life into the intent behind.
No, I appreciate that.
These.
Thank you. Unless there are any more questions for the Executive Director or for the General Counsel, let's go through this section by section as well. Commissioner Petal?
This is just a general comment. At the risk of being repetitive, I just want to thank Christine and Pauline and Andrew and our licensing and investigative team. It's really clear the tremendous amount of effort that went into these regs and the very complex questions that they're trying to address. So I appreciate that. I'm not going to have any comments today.
Okay.
I did have a number of substantive questions as I read through it, but I would like to sit down with you over the next couple weeks and ask about them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Any other general comments or questions before we get into the section by section? Okay. This fewer sections. And again, I'm not going to repeat 935 CMR 502. That's implied with every section. First, .001 purpose. Okay. .002 definitions. .003 co-located marijuana operations. .005 fees. .028 registration of agents affiliated with co-located marijuana operations. I'm going to use CMO as an abbreviation for that going forward.
.101 application requirements. .102 action on applications. .103 licensure and renewal. .104 notification and approval of changes. .105 general operational requirements. .110 security requirements. .120 additional operating requirements for cultivation. .130 additional operating requirements for product manufacturing. .140 additional requirements for retail sale. .1.0 edible nips or marijuana products. .160 testing of marijuana, MIBs, or marijuana products. .300 inspections. .700 waivers. .900 severability. I guess that's a very strong endorsement of the great work that the legal team and the rest of our staff did. Thank you very much.
My apologies, I just copied.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay, you're making a habit of this, it's okay.
It's one of those things.
Would you just give me a page citation?
Sure.
Section and page?
Page 4. It's 10th time looking at something is the charm, apparently. And I apologize that I missed this before, but in marijuana establishment, I didn't see the reference to micro business. So if we could just double check the license categories, make sure we didn't miss anybody. And again, apologies for not noticing that earlier.
Absolutely.
Okay, once again, with the caveat that if people have seen typos or minor edits, they can get those to the general counsel as quickly as possible. And subject to those minor modifications, can I ask them for a motion to approve these draft regulations?
So moved. Second.
Can I have I'm sorry, Commissioner Flanagan made the motion? That the Recreation Commission, Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the draft regulations 935 CMR 502, co-located adult use and medical use marijuana operations. Can we just one more time, what happens next with respect to this transition and to the regulatory process?
That's right. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Commission for your support of the proposed draft regulations. Because with that approval, we will now begin the public comment period, which will begin today. We'll post these to the Commission's website as soon as possible once those kind of ministerial or typo changes are made. We'll also generate notices as required from a regulatory standpoint to the Secretary of State or Secretary of the Commonwealth, as well as the Mass Municipal Association under the kind of required criteria. So we'll send those required notices out today or tomorrow, also kicking off the process. We will accept public comment. Obviously, if folks want to send us letters to the Commission's office on 101 Federal Street, of course, you can also email the Cannabis Commission at mass.gov. Cannabis Commission, not the Cannabis. Cannabis Commission at mass.gov. We'll post all this information on our website, which is masscannabiscontrol.com. Really generating hopefully enough notice for folks to review these in particular depth, but also giving us comments based on these drafts. Again, the intent from drafting them standpoint was to lift the program and shift it, but obviously if folks have other changes they would recommend, we are all ears for those as well. So what happens next is the public comment period. We'll also send out notices as required about those public hearings.
So there will be two on the 29th, is that correct?
That's the plan as of today, correct. So we'll send out and generate notices relative to those which will appear in kind of newspapers of general circulation. So we'll begin that compliance process as well. But if folks are hoping to mark in their calendars October 29th as a significant date, and then we'll bring back any those public comments and any recommended changes to the Commission beginning really in November.
And right now the intent is to have one in the eastern part of the state, one in the central to western part of the state.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Any questions from the commissioners or any comments? Commissioner Tyler?
Sorry, being not very experienced in these regulatory processes. So since the medical regs and the adult use regs are different, if one set is open, that doesn't mean the other set is open for changes, right?
So from a scope standpoint would be the 501 and 502, correct?
Okay. And so we talked about revisiting the adult use regs between October and February, but we wouldn't be making medical reg changes at that time. Is that right?
Again, from the scope standpoint, if the changes were to 935 CMR 500, that would be the limited scope of any of those changes. There is, I think, a likelihood that even incorporating medical may facilitate or necessitate changes to the adult use regs, and we would, I guess, work through that process as a staff, then bring recommendations to the Commission. My hope is to do that also in a pretty short order as well. But for today's purpose and from the public comment period purpose for today is medical and then the co-location.
Do we know on the horizon when would be the next time that we would make changes to these medical regs?
Hard
To say or predict at this point.
I think we have some say in that, some flexibility in that. The intent, at least as I believe it should be, is bring it over, make sure the transition is effective and successful, and most importantly, is non-disruptive to patients. And once we've had a chance to kind of work with the program, work with the staff, then I think we should, at the Commission, decide, at what point do we need to reconsider some of the regulations. So I think it's really, we have, aside from the workload of staff, which is obviously an important criterion, I think that it's the discretion of the Commission about when we should take up changes to these regulations. But the intent is to, dive into the medical program a little more deeply than we've been able to do when it's been in another agency.
Okay, so I have a question for the four of you then. I'm assuming we're all on the same page that eventually, in terms of how we treat agents and how we treat businesses, that we want to be consistent between the two programs, given, of course, that the laws are different and we can't change that. So, is that something that we want to do now in these changes? Okay, we want to take the program, see how it works for a while, and then.
That's my opinion. What you just said is my opinion, that we should take the program. Again, the focus, at least in my opinion, the most important focus is to ensure the transition occurs with no disruption to patients, which means, I think, doing it with as few changes as possible, bring the program in-house, learn about it, work with the staff that we'll be inheriting, and we can decide how quickly thereafter we can get into the issues that you just raised. But my opinion is we should not make any of those changes now. That's my opinion. And
we could also further discuss it when we get to the point of reviewing the notice and comment, because there are, a few substantive things in here that definitely are kind of, hitting me a certain way. So I think that's all part of the discussion
that
about
we'll have
reviewing
back in,
notice and comment.
we'll have in November. Go ahead, Commissioner McBride.
I was going to say, I think I understand what Commissioner Title is getting at, and I do think that it is relevant to definitely be discussing it as part of this process to make sure that we aren't, causing sort of like an unnecessary and dumb delay or impediment to somebody, right? We want to kind of try to smooth that way and be consistent. So I think that we should take that on as part of this process to really kind of try to work out where there may be inconsistencies and figure those out. And I agree with that sentiment.
Thank you.
I agree.
Great. So I think that is it with respect to regulations. Can I just finish this section? I think we've made pretty good progress. Unless anybody would like, let's just keep going through the next part of the agenda, which is the provisional license application recommendation by the staff. So thanks very much again for all the work that got us through that previous agenda item. There are 6 staff recommendations for provisional licenses and 4 for Patriot Care Corp. and 2 from Northeast Alternatives. Mr. Executive Director, let's go through them in the order they are here, starting with Patriot Care Corp. MCM 281265, which is for Tier 6 indoor cultivation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As indicated, the application for your consideration today, the applicant is Patriot Care Corp. The proposed address of the establishment is 170 Lincoln Street in Lowell. The license being sought is that of a cultivation license for Tier 6 indoor, which authorizes 40,001 to 50,000 square feet. This applicant has 3 other applications pending before the commission, that of a product manufacturer and 2 retail. The individuals associated with the business are Robert Mayerson, Nicholas Vita, Michael Abbott, George Aganis, Mary Alice Miller, David Hart, and David Catanzo. The entity associated with the establishment is Columbia Care LLC. They serve as a parent company to that, to Patriot Care Corp. The applicant is an R&D priority, having existed as an R&D with DPH. This is a proposed co-located facility in Lowell. The R&D has a final certificate of registration for dispensing, cultivation, and processing. Host community agreement was signed on April 13th, and certification was provided. The community outreach meeting was held on May 30th, with notification published in the Lowell Sun. We heard back from the City of Lowell on August 1st that there's no objections, and the fact that the applicant is compliant with all local ordinances and bylaws. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact includes continuing to hire individuals specifically from disproportionate areas, such as Greenfield and Lowell, and developing apprenticeships and educational programs for individuals living in disproportionately impacted areas who are interested in the marijuana industry. The applicant expects this program to be operational by the fall of 2018. There were no concerns raised during the background check on individuals or entities associated with the application. There were disclosures of past civil or criminal actions. However, none of those disclosures presented suitability issues, and no disclosures of any occupational license issues. Columbia Care, as the parent company, is operational in other jurisdictions. That includes Arizona, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. These disclosures do not present suitability issues. They've secured their certificate of good standing with the Department of Revenue as well as the Secretary of the Commonwealth. Their proposed timeline for becoming operational is that they are vertically integrated as an R&D, and they claim they can be operational in the adult use market once being granted a final license. Their operations hours are Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They submitted the required summaries of their plans, policies, and procedures. We reviewed those summaries and deemed them to be substantially compliant with our requirements. We will review full compliance during our inspection process and require that before a final license is issued. The diversity plan includes their plan to effectuate their goal of providing equitable opportunities throughout its operation by doing the following: engaging with vocational schools, community colleges, veteran reentry programs, advocacy groups to educate disenfranchised individuals about their operation and possible employment opportunities, adopting organizational policies that mandate fairness and equity, offering mentoring programs for disadvantaged employees, providing career guidance and planning programs, and lastly, implementing a non-discriminatory merit-based performance appraisal system. This is a cultivation license, and their plan is to, the applicant described their cultivation cycle as being a 14 to 15 week process from propagation through harvest, and they discussed their procedures employed in the following areas: pesticide control and prevention, environmental media use, and energy and lighting standards to be utilized. The staff is recommending a provisional license be issued with the following conditions: that a final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations, that their final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain their compliance with our regulations. The final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. That the applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to commission staff. And lastly, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that we've done a due diligence review of the application, and as of this date, they have demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and their suitability for licensure, and accordingly, we recommend that the provisional license be issued with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Then can I have a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation for Patriot Care Corp. MCM 281265?
So moved. Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission has approved the staff recommendation. Thank you. Next up, Patriot Care Corporation, MRN 281283, retailer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant is Patriot Care Corp. again. The address of this establishment is 70 Industrial Avenue East, also in Lowell. The application, the license being sought is that of a retailer. As previously indicated, they have 3 other applications of cultivation, which was just approved, retail and product manufacturing. The individuals on this application are the same as previously mentioned, with the same parent company of Columbia Care LLC. This is the R&D priority applicant. Their host community agreement was executed on April 13th, and again, the outreach meeting was held on the 30th of May. We also heard back from Lowell on August 1st for this particular application as well. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as previously mentioned. No issues arose during the background check as previously mentioned. Their proposed timeline for becoming operational is, again, as they're vertically integrated R&D, they can be operational once granted the final license. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. They've complied with submitting summaries of their plans, policies, and procedures. We reviewed those summaries and determined them to be compliant. We will, again, we'll review them during our inspection process for full compliance, which will be required before a final license is issued. The diversity plan is the same as previously mentioned. Again, this is a retail application, a retail license being sought. They are vertically integrated as an R&D that is currently operational. They've applied for adult use cultivation and product manufacturing licenses, and therefore plans to be self-sufficient in regard to obtaining marijuana for their retail establishment. We recommend approving a provisional license with the following conditions: that the final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. The final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to commission staff. And lastly, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, its suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that we've done a due diligence review of this application, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and demonstrated suitability for licensure. Therefore, we recommend approving the provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? And can I have a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation for Patriot Care Corp. MRN 281283?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please? Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the staff recommendation to Patriot Care MRN 281283. Next up again, Patriot Care Corporation MRN 281282, also for retailer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, this applicant is also Patriot Care. The proposed address of the establishment is 7 Legion Avenue in Greenfield. The license being sought is that of a retailer. Those pending applications remain. The executives or folks tied to the application are also the same, with the same parent company of Columbia Care LLC. Patriot Care has secured their R&D priority status. Their host community agreement was executed on June 8th of 2018, with their outreach meeting being held on March 26th, 2018, with notice published in the Greenfield Recorder. The Commission received a response from Greenfield on August 13th, stating that the applicant is in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as previously mentioned. There were no concerns raised during the background check process, and the disclosures remain the same as previously mentioned. The proposed timeline to become operational is that, again, they're a vertically integrated RMD, and they can be operational once a final license is issued. The proposed hours are Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. They submitted the required summaries of the plans, policies, and procedures, reviewed those summaries, and determined them to be compliant with our regulations. We will secure full compliance during our inspectional process, which will be required before a final license is issued. The diversity plan is the same as previously mentioned. Their plan for obtaining marijuana and marijuana products is that they're vertically integrated R&D and are currently operational. They've applied for adult use cultivation and product manufacturing licenses and plan to be self-sufficient in regard to obtaining marijuana for their retail establishments. The Commission has reviewed, staff recommends issuing the provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to certification that the application remains in compliance with the EPH regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that its facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. That the applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission's staff. And lastly, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to our regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses. We certify that we've done a due diligence review of this application, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. Accordingly, we recommend approving the provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the Executive Director? Then can I have a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation for Patriot Care Corp. MRN 281282?
So moved.
Second. Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved staff recommendation for MRN 281282. Next, again, Patriot Care Corp. MPN 281308, product manufacturer. Mr. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is Patriot Care. The proposed address of the establishment is 170 Lincoln Street, Lowell, the same location as their cultivation license. The license being sought here is that of a product manufacturer. The individuals tied to the establishment are the same as previously mentioned, with the same parent company of Columbia Care LLC. The applicant is R&D priority applicant. The host community agreement was executed on April 13th with a community outreach meeting held on May 30th. We heard back from Lowell on August 1st, stating that the applicant is in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as previously mentioned. There were no concerns raised during the background check process on individuals or entities associated. The applicant, for their plan to become operational as a vertically integrated R&D, they claim they can be operational upon being granted a final license. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They submitted the required summaries. We reviewed those summaries and determined them to be compliant. The diversity plan is the same as previously mentioned. The products to be manufactured include sublingual tinctures, capsules, hash and keef, rosin, shatter, oil, and oil cartridges, topical solids and creams, and edible candies and baked goods. The Commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions: that the final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with EPH regulations. The final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with our regulations. That the final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state, local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. That the applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission staff. And lastly, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses. We certify that we've done a due diligence review of this application, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. We therefore recommend approval of the provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Questions? You have a motion, please, then, to approve staff recommendation for MPN 281308.
So moved.
Have a second, please.
Second.
Let the record show that Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Oh, sorry, correction, Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to second. So made second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the commission unanimously approve the staff recommendation for MPN 281308. Thank you. Next, Northeast Alternatives Incorporated, MPN 281319, product manufacturer. Mr. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant is Northeast Alternatives Incorporated. The proposed address is 999 William S. Canning Boulevard in Fall River. The license being sought is that of the product manufacturer. The Commission will recall that there was a previously issued or granted provisional license for retail, and the next application is that of a cultivation. The individuals tied to the establishment include Christopher Harkins, Richard Rozier, Kyle Bishop, Zach Cooper, Jeffrey Johnson, Andy Peliquin, and Jared Meehan. There are no other entities that have direct or indirect authority over this establishment. Northeast Alternatives is an R&D priority applicant. They intend to be co-located with their facility in Fall River. The host community agreement was executed on April 13th. The community outreach meeting was also held on April 13th, with notice published in the Herald News. There are no objections communicated to the Commission. We received a response from Fall River on August 28th. Their plan to positively impact the areas of disproportionate impact. It's the same as previously mentioned in their previous application, which is to hire a diverse staff that have lived 5 of the last 10 years in an area of disproportionate impact, conduct community service days and host charitable events in Fall River, and provide educational seminars in the areas of restorative justice, jail diversion, and workforce development. There were no concerns raised during the background check process on individuals or entities tied to the application. They secured their certificate of good standing from the Department of Revenue and the Secretary of the Commonwealth. Their proposed timeline to become operational is that they are vertically integrated RMD that recently opened their medical use operations to registered patients. The applicant states they could be operational in the adult use market within 3 months of being issued a provisional license. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Sunday, 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. They submitted the required summaries of plans, policies, and procedures. We reviewed those summaries and determined them to be substantially compliant with our regulations. Their summary of the diversity plan includes the following: hosting career fairs, counseling sessions, and trainings for the benefit of underrepresented and minority communities, developing relationships with organizations serving minorities, women, people of all gender identities and sexual orientations, veterans, and persons with disabilities, with the goal of attracting and hiring a diverse team, and lastly, measuring their progress on the diversity goals by requiring periodic workforce utilization reports to be conducted by their HR director. This is a manufacturing or product manufacturing license. The applicant plans to produce the following products: oils, wax, shatter, oral tinctures, edibles, lotions, and balms. Commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements of our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission staff. And lastly, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, and suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that we've done a due diligence review of this application, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and suitability for licensure. We therefore recommend approval of the provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Any questions? Then can I have a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation for MPN 281319?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second?
Is that Commissioner Flanagan?
Yes.
Sorry, you're hidden over there. Let's record show Commissioner Flanagan made a motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the staff recommendation for MPN 281319. Last for today is also Northeast Alternatives Incorporated, MCN 281319, which is Tier 1 indoor cultivation. Mr. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last application for your consideration today is that of Northeast Alternatives. The proposed address is also 999 William S. Canning Boulevard in Fall River. The license being sought is that of a cultivation for Tier 1 indoor operation, which permits up to 5,000 square feet. The applicant has previously now secured a retail and product manufacturing provisional license. The individuals are the same as previously mentioned. There are no other entities with direct or indirect control. Northeast Alternatives is an R&D priority applicant. Their host community agreement was executed on April 13th. Outreach meeting was also held on April 13th. The commission received a response from Fall River on August 28th. The plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as previously mentioned, and there were no concerns raised during the background check on individuals or entities associated with the application. Their plan to become operational is that they are already a vertically integrated RMD that recently opened for medical use operations to registered patients. The applicant states that they can be operational in the adult use market within 3 months from being issued a provisional license. Their proposed hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Sunday, 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. They submitted the required summaries as previously mentioned. The diversity plan, as summarized, is also as previously mentioned, and their cultivation plan includes that their plan methodically summarizes various techniques in the areas of climate control, irrigation, and pest control prevention. The applicant also provided a step-by-step description of the procedures utilized in their propagation, vegetation, flowering, and harvesting stages. The commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions: that the final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with the EPH regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to commission staff. And lastly, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that we've conducted a due diligence review of this application. As of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. We therefore recommend approval of the provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I think can I have a motion, please, to accept staff recommendation for Northeast Alternatives Incorporated MCM 281319.
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved staff recommendation for MCM 281319. Thank you, Mr. Executive Director. And also thank you to the investigations and licensing staff. You guys are really doing a great job, and I know the workload is continuing to increase, but thank you for the great job. Anything else, Mr. Executive Director? Yours?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any other items on the agenda. Mr. Title?
If I may, just a recommendation for the executive director, and this is not a direction, it's just a recommendation, but I think that.
Shave?
Excuse me?
Think he should shave? Is that the recommendation you're gonna make?
No, I love the beard.
We end where we begin.
Damn.
No, my recommendation is now that we are into September and we have these great new staff members, and I see the licensing and investigative staff doing so much and inspections underway, I think our next meeting would be a really good time to maybe revisit the timeline and talk about the next steps. And I think if the public has that information that we all have, it'll allow us to focus more on the important policy discussions about to take place.
Great. There being no further business before I adjourn, next commission meeting is 2 weeks from today, September 20th. It will be here at the Health Policy Commission, and I'm sorry I omitted my opening comments to thank the Health Policy Commission for the use of their facilities, but we'll be meeting here 2 weeks from today. There being no further business for the commission, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that we are adjourned as of 2:31 p.m. on September 6, 2018. Thank you very much.